Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You are watching NBC News now. Here's what's happening. A transit employee in Northern California opening fire, killing several of his co-workers. Authorities now trying to piece together what happened.
Our thoughts and love goes out to the VTA family, to the employees who were at the yard.
Plus, our $1 million lotteries driving up vaccination rates. Ohio about to announce its Vax a Million winner.
Did the Ohio lottery play a role at all in your decision to come get vaccinated?
I wouldn't say overall, but it's definitely extra motivation.
And she's comparing COVID rules to the Holocaust. Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene taking heat from her own party on Capitol Hill. What House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is saying about her incendiary comments. We start with the deadly rail yard shooting in San Jose. MSNBC weekend anchor Lindsay Reiser joining me now. Lindsay, I know police were just giving another news conference. What new information did they share?
Quite a bit, Allison. We now know that the shooting took place behind me at the VTA facility, the Valley Transportation Authority, at a time that there was a shift change. So people working the midnight shift, people working the day shift, they were all there at the same time. So a larger amount of employees there at that time. And we're also told that deputies, when they got there, they rendered aid and they also rescued people out of the building. Now, they reiterated 8 people were shot. The suspect also dead, so a total of 9. And they believe all signs right now point to the fact that the suspect died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. They say the deputies did not exchange gunfire with the suspect. We also got an update on the search for explosive devices taking place behind me. We know that several bomb-sniffing dogs made several hits inside the building, and so they have been combing through every single room to try and give the all clear. They say that is still going to take some time, and they actually have a bomb robot inside as well. Now, of course, when something like this happens, everybody wants to look to a motive. Why did this happen? And right now, investigators aren't giving any clues about that, but we know NBC News has confirmed the suspect's name is Samuel Cassidy, who is a now former VTA employee. Whether that employee was active or former I don't mean to say former as though that person was fired. We don't have that information yet. But I also want to talk a little bit about what the sheriff said and really kind of the heart-stopping moments that happened when this shots fired report came out. Let's listen to that.
The first teams through the door were the sheriff's office and San Jose Police Department. And they're my true heroes. There was active shooting going on at that time. There were victims shot in 2 separate buildings. But they responded the way that they should. They took their life in their hands, and I know for sure that when the suspect knew the law enforcement was there, he took his own life.
Really some heart-stopping moments there, Allison. And we know that Governor Gavin Newsom, who was also at the press conference, spent some time with some families who were here in the Family Reunification Center, where loved ones are waiting for any kind of word. And he said many of them still don't have that word, just waiting on the phone call from their loved one or from sadly, potentially the coroner's office. And he also said he was determined to make meaning out of this horrific tragedy when talking about gun reform in the state, Allison.
Lindsay, what else, if anything, can you tell us about the victims? I know there are still so many questions about what happened here, about who was involved, but do we know anything about the people who died or were injured?
8 people who were shot, and we still don't know exactly how many people were injured, Allison, or the severity of their injuries. But we know that at least some, if not all, of the victims are VTA employees. And we saw so many employees, a few dozen, in fact, walking across the street from the sheriff's office to this county building in front of me for that reunification center. And they were distraught. They were shaken, of course, having been through what they've been through today. And I also caught up with loved ones after that who simply had no answers and were just as equally distraught, Allison. So really just a terrible day all around here.
Yeah, Lindsay, a horrible tragedy, an emotional day, and I know a tough one to cover as a reporter as well. So thank you so much for what you're doing out there today. We appreciate you. $1 million, full scholarships, just a few incentives for Ohio residents to get the COVID vaccine. The state announcing its first winners tonight. NBC News Now co-anchor Morgan Radford is in Columbus.
Allison, that's right. One lucky winner is going to be announced tonight at 7:29 p.m. Eastern, and that's going to be the first winner of 5 weekly winners here in the Ohio Vax-A-Million lottery system. But the truth is, Allison, this is just one of several states implementing these really creative ways to make sure that people get vaccinated. Take a listen.
Good news and hope ahead of the first holiday weekend of the summer. COVID infections down to levels not seen since last June. And the U.S. hitting a major milestone Tuesday with half of all adults now fully vaccinated. As states push to get shots in arms for the rest. For more than 2.7 million Ohio residents, their COVID-19 vaccinations aren't just their ticket to immunity, but maybe $1 million.
What do you think about the Vax-A-Million lottery here in Ohio?
I mean, it's a pretty cool thing.
The state holding its first of 5 $1 million drawings tonight for people who have gotten at least their first dose. For those under 18, they could win a full scholarship to any Ohio State college or university.
Did the Ohio lottery play a role at all in your decision to come get vaccinated?
I wouldn't say overall, but it's definitely extra motivation.
Despite criticism from state lawmakers saying it's a waste of taxpayer money, the governor says it's working.
We've increased the number of people getting vaccinated by 45%. Where we've seen the most increase in vaccinations is those 16 and 17-year-olds, 94% increase among that age group. So that's very exciting.
Ohio is one of many states and companies offering incentives to boost vaccinations. Delaware becoming the latest state to announce a vaccine lottery. And in West Virginia, people 16 to 35 can get $100 savings bonds. United Airlines is even offering its loyalty program members a chance to win free flights. And it appears to be paying off as the U.S. hits that 50% vaccinated milestone for adults. Moderna also announcing its vaccine is 100% effective in kids ages 12 to 17. If authorized for use, it would be the second vaccine available to younger Americans. Another step towards getting the country back on its feet.
When I asked the governor why he chose this particular method to incentivize his residents, he said, look, because this is the way to get those people who are on the fence, for whom it would take something pretty serious besides just protecting their health to get them to take the vaccine. So that's who he's targeting right now, those people who are still a bit skeptical.
Let's bring in Dr. Uche Blackstock, NBC News medical contributor and emergency medicine physician. Dr. Blackstock, the White House encouraging states to offer vaccine incentives like Ohio's $1 million lottery. Here's senior advisor Andy Slavitt.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has unlocked a secret. People do care about getting vaccinated, but it turns out they also have other things they care about. Some of those things might encourage people to think about what might otherwise be a lower priority. Bottom line is, with this guidance, we encourage states to use their creativity to draw attention to vaccines and to get their states and the country back to normal as quickly as possible.
So, Dr. Blackstock, what do you think of using lotteries or other prizes to persuade people to get the vaccine?
Well, Allison, I agree. I think these incentive programs are smart and innovative ways to get people vaccinated. We're already through the phase 1 of the vaccination process, and those were people who were more than willing to get vaccinated. And now we're kind of in that tough phase. It's very challenging. There are people who are not getting vaccinated for many different reasons, but one, some people just need that extra push, those folks that are on the fence. And I think that these incentive programs, especially the ones that offer money or scholarships, I think will help get more people, into those vaccination sites.
Yeah, $1 million, pretty good incentive. President Biden wants a stronger investigation into the origins of COVID-19. Here's what he said in a statement. As of today, the U.S. intelligence community has coalesced around 2 likely scenarios, but has not reached a definitive conclusion on this question. I have now asked the intelligence community to redouble their efforts to collect and analyze information and report back to me in 90 days. This theory that COVID-19 escaped from a lab in Wuhan, gaining some traction. Why is it important at this point to know where the virus originated? And do you think we'll ever really know where it came from?
Well, I think that this theory definitely is plausible. It's not definite. We don't have all of the evidence that we need. I mean, questions that I would ask, especially about this most recent information about these 3 lab workers are, what exactly were they exposed to? What were their diagnoses at the hospital? What were lab protocols like? Unfortunately, due to the lack of transparency by Chinese authorities at the beginning of the pandemic, and then even during the WHO recent investigation, we still have more questions than answers. So I definitely agree with President Biden that we do need an investigation to detect the origin of coronavirus, because, we've seen the devastation it's caused, and it'll help us and protect us from the next pandemic.
Dr. Blackstock, there's a new poll on vaccine honesty. Here are some of the numbers. 88% of people trust family or close friends about their vaccine status. That drops to 71% among coworkers and 25% for people dining indoors or at a bar. Those stats are from an Axios and Ipsos poll. You tweeted about this today asking, was the trust ever really there? What do you think, and how can we work on it?
Right. I mean, it's those responses are not surprising. People are more likely to trust those closest to them, those within their circle of trust, people that are family members or that they work closely with. But I think what this really tells us, especially now that some of the mask restrictions have been lifted, especially for vaccinated people, is that we're going to need businesses, employers, state and local entities to make sure that we are still keeping unvaccinated people protected. And what does that look like? That looks like either asking for proof of vaccination or requiring masks still indoor areas where the infection rates are still quite high and vaccination rates are low. And so, I think that we can all agree that it's hard to trust folks that we don't know. And so we're going to need businesses and state and local authorities to keep everyone safe.
It's incredible when you go out, even just this week when I went to the grocery store or to get a cup of coffee or to the farm stand, I know I'm vaccinated. People around me are vaccinated. Everybody still has their masks on, even if the signs say that if you're vaccinated, you can let them go. And I'm sure that trust factor, that concern, definitely plays in.
Yeah,
I know it's on
absolutely.
my mind when I go anywhere that I don't know what everybody else has been doing. I only know what I've been doing.
Right.
Speaking of maybe losing the masks and having a little more fun, Memorial Day weekend is almost here. And CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says, if you're vaccinated, have a good time. Here she is.
If you are vaccinated, you are protected, and you can enjoy your Memorial Day. If you are not vaccinated, our guidance has not changed for you. You remain at risk of infection. You still need to mask and take other precautions.
Dr. Blackstock, what is your advice for families this weekend?
Right. No, and that last part of what Dr. Walensky said is so important, that the rules and the guidelines for unvaccinated people have not changed. And as we go into Memorial Day weekend, people are going to be traveling and there are going to be large gatherings. And so, I would say, obviously, in small gatherings, when you know who else is there and you know the vaccination status, we know that even for unvaccinated people, it's safe for them to be in small gatherings with people who are vaccinated. But if you are in, large gatherings or crowds with people you don't know their vaccination status, if you are unvaccinated, you should definitely mask up. And physically distance. As for children, especially indoors, we have to keep our children with their masks on because they still have not, especially those under 12, have not been vaccinated yet. But it seems like outdoor is the place that people want to be. Spend as much time outdoors and not in indoor crowded areas. And that's the way that you're going to make sure that Memorial Day weekend is going to be a safe vacation for everybody.
Yeah, let's pray for some sunshine so people can get outside and enjoy themselves. Dr.
Right.
Blackstock, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
37 million Americans are going somewhere this Memorial Day weekend, according to AAA. That is a big win for the struggling travel industry. For people looking to get out of town, it means fewer rental cars and crowded planes. Some of those crowds getting a little bit unruly. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello shows us what's going on.
Hey, Allison, yeah, a lot of competing headlines in the travel world today, but let's start with the good news, and that is that airlines in the United States are bouncing back because Americans are coming back in droves. Of course, they're packing highways, as you probably know if you've been driving, but they're also flooding airports. And so if you are traveling either this weekend or over the summer, don't expect that middle seat next to you to be open. From clogged highways to airline cattle calls, clear evidence America is on the rebound. A year ago, in the grip of COVID, the country's roads and airports were emptied out. I was here reporting from an empty airport. Take a look. It's a virtual ghost town. What a difference a year and multiple vaccines make. Kay and Dan Lackadoo flying home from L.A.
Well, our daughter lives here. We have only one grandson. And I will cry. We haven't seen him in 18 months. So we spent a week here, and it was such a blessing.
AAA predicts 37 million of us will travel this holiday weekend, up 60% from 2020. But you'll need to plan ahead. Rental cars are in short supply. As for the top road trip destinations, Las Vegas, Orlando, Myrtle Beach, Denver, and Nashville.
It's been fun to get back on the airplane, be able to travel.
But this morning, Homeland Security is weighing in on an alarming increase in what the FAA calls unruly and dangerous behavior in airports and on planes. As we reported Tuesday, 2,500 cases year to date. The FAA chief even retweeting links to our reports saying we have zero tolerance for bad behavior on airplanes. Just this past Sunday, a Southwest Airlines flight attendant lost 2 teeth, attacked by a passenger.
I'm appalled that the flying public attitudes and tones has degenerated enough that flight attendants would have to come home to their families with such extensive injuries. 60
TSA officers have also been attacked this year, very often over the federal mask mandate, still required in airports and on planes.
For individuals who violate the law, especially when it jeopardizes so much that we have invested in on behalf of the American people, will bring the full force of the law to bear.
So an update on that flight attendant who was injured. She suffered 2 broken teeth. In addition, other injuries. A suspect was arrested, a 28-year-old woman. She's been charged by police there in San Diego. By the way, these are serious potential charges for interfering with a flight crew. That's a federal offense. Jail time as possible. Fines up to $35,000 per offense. And then in addition, potentially banned for life by the airline. So you wouldn't be able to fly again on that airline and maybe even others.
Let's check in with NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She has the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Simone, what is up?
Hey, Allison, this time we're starting in Arizona, where state Republicans have passed a bill stripping the Democratic Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, of her ability to defend election lawsuits. The bill puts the state's Republican Attorney General in charge of defending all lawsuits until 2023, around the end of his and Hobbs' terms. The measure comes as Senate Republicans lead a 2020 election audit of Arizona's largest county, which Hobbs has sharply criticized. Well, U.S. regulators downgrading Mexico's aviation safety rating. Now, U.S. airlines won't be able to sell tickets on flights operated by Mexican airlines. It'll mainly impact Delta, which has a partnership with Aeromexico. The FAA says Mexico doesn't meet standards set by a UN aviation group. And a powerful cyclone battering eastern India, forcing more than 1 million people to evacuate. The storm packing gusts of up to 87 miles per hour, destroying tens of thousands of mud houses. It is the second to hit India in a week as it battles a deadly second COVID wave as well. And a Dutch court ruling could have major consequences for corporate polluters. The landmark ruling says oil giant Royal Dutch Shell must reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. That's a much tougher goal than the company's current aim of cutting emissions by 20% by the same year. Spokesperson for Shell saying the company expects to appeal the decision. And Amazon is buying the historic movie studio MGM for $8.5 billion. The move gives Amazon access to a catalog of film and television titles, beefing up its streaming service, including the James Bond and Rocky franchises. MGM is Amazon's second biggest acquisition ever, following the $13.7 billion purchase of Whole Foods in 2017. Amazon chugging along on its path to worldwide domination, it seems, Allison.
Yeah, they're getting there, Simone. Thank you so much. Former President Trump's legal issues a little more grand today. The Washington Post reporting Manhattan DA Cy Vance, a Democrat, has convened a grand jury to look into alleged financial misconduct by the Trump organization and to a possible criminal charges. That's according to two people familiar with the development. The DA's office has not confirmed those reports, though. Trump calling this a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in American history. The Trump organization denying any wrongdoing. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now. So Pete, what does convening a grand jury tell us about this 2-year-old investigation into the former president?
Well, it tells us that it's moving along, but it doesn't really tell us much more than that. A couple of things to bear in mind. Number one, prosecutors have to use grand juries all the time. In many states, they have state laws. In the federal system, it's the Constitution that says you can't indict somebody unless the indictment is approved by a grand jury. So it's something that they use all the time. During their investigations, they have to use a grand jury to get subpoenas that are court orders for someone to turn over evidence or testify. So it's a process that they use all the time. What's different here, we understand, is that this is a special grand jury that will be hearing more evidence about this. And rather than using other grand juries, it'll be all sort of confined into this one. But in terms of what or who specifically they're looking at, we just don't know because grand jury proceedings are secret.
So, Pete, who are some of the key faces and names involved here?
Well, obviously the president, the former president. We don't know if he is the subject of this investigation or not, but it's his organization that's being looked at. And another person is Alan Weisselberg, the former the Trump organization's chief financial officer, who really knows all of the ins and outs of corporate finance there. And the allegation, remember, is that the Trump organization would overstate its assets when it wanted to get loans, but understate them when it wanted to evade taxes. And they're also, we're told by people that are following this and also court filings, that they're looking at the compensation and gifts that were given to some Trump employees to see if they were paying all their taxes. So, you know, plenty of people to be looked at here. We know that they've tried to get more records out of Weisselberg. That's what his former daughter-in-law has said, and she said she believes he will cooperate. That would be the goal, of course, of prosecutors, to try to find people in the organization who would be willing to tell what they know in exchange, perhaps, for leniency.
Pete, this isn't the only investigation into the former president. Just a reminder for our viewers, what else is he dealing with?
Well, there's a civil investigation by the Attorney General in New York who's looking at things involving the Trump charities, for example. Remember that he's also subject to a criminal investigation in Georgia for what may be attempts to influence the way the votes were counted. And then, of course, there are a number of civil lawsuits that he faces, 3 of them here in Washington over the Capitol riot. Civil lawsuits filed by former people who appeared on his television shows, a libel lawsuit, members of his family. So, you know, his lawyers are busy.
Yeah, they certainly are, Pete Williams. And you're busy, too, reporting on all of this. Thanks so much for being with us.
Sure.
Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene causing more headaches for House Republicans, this time comparing mask mandates to the Holocaust. So what can Republicans do? Well, they could kick her out of their caucus. But in his latest article, NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen writes, MTG will continue to be a problem for House GOP leaders, but the chances of them kicking her out of their ranks are slim to none. John is here with me now. John, the House GOP conference has the right to expel her according to their rule book. How could they do that? And just explain for us why you think the chances here are literally slim to none.
Well, it's Rule 1, Paragraph B of their rule book provides for the expulsion of members from the conference on a 2/3 vote of the conference. That means 2/3 of her Republican colleagues would have to decide to kick her out. I talked to Congressman Lynn Westmoreland, who was very close to leadership as a member before he retired. And he said he was the one who said the chances are slim to none. And there are a few reasons for that. Number one, some of them aren't that upset about what she said. But number two, they really don't want to set a precedent for the things members saying being a reason to kick them out of their conference. She is now facing some calls from Democrats for reprimand. Brad Schneider, congressman from Illinois, says he's going to introduce a resolution to censure her in the full House, which would not take that 2/3 Republican vote, but would be presumably all or most of the Democrats and some number of Republicans.
John, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy tweeted out yesterday, Marjorie is wrong, and her intentional decision to compare the horrors of the Holocaust with wearing masks is appalling. Let me be clear, the House Republican Conference condemns this language. I mean, sure, strong words from McCarthy, but no serious repercussions. So what's the lesson here for Greene?
I mean, there is no lesson for Greene other than that what she has been doing over time, saying very offensive things, is very lucrative. It's not a lesson she's learning in the House. It's a lesson she's learning from grassroots Republican donors. She raised over $3 million in the first 3 months of this year, which is an enormous amount for a House incumbent to raise in a single quarter. If you were to project that out, that'd be about $24 million over the 2-year election cycle. And you can see she's out there rallying, to basically recount votes from the last presidential election with Matt Gaetz, the congressman who is under investigation with regard to that case the FBI is looking into involving possible sex trafficking of minors. So, she's not backing down. She's repeatedly said the same thing. And, when she's been called on it, she's gone after the people who are coming after her.
In February, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had the House vote to strip Greene of her 2 committee assignments. You mentioned some other things that they're considering, but is there a next move that you think would be smart for the Democrats or is just among their options? I realize that, they may not have too many choices here in terms of dealing with her.
I mean, generally speaking, they like to get votes, force the Republicans to put up votes in support of Marjorie Taylor Greene, even among those Republicans who will say that what she said doesn't represent their views. When they vote for her, that marries them to her. And so, like you said, Nancy Pelosi had a vote earlier this year to strip her of her committee assignments. Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, could have done that if he had been able to get the Republican conference to choose to do it, which is a pretty heavy sanction, but certainly a lighter one than expelling her from the caucus. Or the House could also expel her from the chamber. But again, members of Congress are very loath to tell voters who they should vote for unless you're talking about redistricting where they choose their voters.
John Allen, we always love having you on. Thanks for making the time for us.
Take care, Allison.
The opening ceremony for the Summer Olympics now less than 2 months away, but there are growing calls to cancel the games because of the COVID situation in Tokyo. NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons has this story, and we should note NBC Universal, the parent company of NBC News, owns the U.S. media rights to the upcoming Olympics.
Hey there, Alison. I've got to tell you, a major Japanese newspaper and official partner of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics is now calling for the Games to be cancelled, citing health concerns and the potential strain on the Japanese medical system. Pressure growing on Japan to cancel the already delayed Tokyo 2020 Games. The CDC and the US State Department warning Americans not to travel to Japan.
But the White House standing by U.S. athletes hoping to compete.
We're talking about athletes, of course, traveling under the Olympic umbrella. This is one of the very limited categories of U.S. travelers that are actually planning on going to Japan.
Tokyo and 9 other areas of the country remain under a state of emergency. The country desperately trying to control a new wave of infections responsible for more than 5,000 new cases a day. The surge putting a strain on Japan's health system. Officials now racing to step up its initially slow vaccine campaign, opening mass vaccination centres for the elderly. But with less than 2 months until the opening ceremony, public concern about the Games is being felt. Despite a ban on overseas spectators, many in Japan still fear the arrival of tens of thousands of athletes, officials, journalists and support staff may cause another COVID surge. Japan is moving forward, the Olympic torch on a scaled-down tour around the country. And test events to try out new Olympic venues are being held under a strict health code that will remain in place during the Games.
We have put in place comprehensive COVID-19 countermeasures to ensure that the athletes of the world can come together in a safe environment for everyone.
The International Olympic Committee insisting the Games can go ahead safely with strict COVID protocols in place. Frequent testing, masks and temperature checks will be enforced. No singing or chanting will be allowed. And few spectators will be on site. Organisers face an increasingly challenging task as the countdown to the Games continues. Now, the head of the IOC has promised that 70% of athletes and officials will be vaccinated by the time the Games go ahead. And in fact, 3 vaccine producers, Alison, have promised to donate vaccinations for that effort. But, you know, this is tough stuff. There's the potential cost of cancelling the Games versus the cost of a spike in infections, should that happen after the Olympics. And then there is the potential political cost. The Prime Minister of Japan facing an election, Alison, just months after the Games are held.
Italy getting ready to welcome back American tourists after more than a year, the country trying to recover economically from the pandemic. But when and how will Americans be able to return? MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing has the best assignment in TV today and has more from Cortona.
Hey, Allison, and welcome to Cortona, the town made famous in the book and movie Under the Tuscan Sun. But it has been a very dark year, almost year and a half here, because so much depends on tourism. Let me give you a couple of quick examples. Behind me, you see Enoteca Molosini. They do these big wine dinners. A lot of the people who go are Americans. They're not going to be able to restart those, they think, for a couple of months. Just down the street next to it, a woman came over to talk to me. She does cooking lessons. 80% of her customers are Americans. And then just around the corner, there's a jewelry store called Del Brenna. American wife, Italian husband. I talked to them as well as another American who owns a business here. She has a travel agency. She's starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel because of these COVID-free flights. Take a listen to what they all had to tell me.
I went from having absolutely nothing to do to my phone ringing off the hook and receiving emails every afternoon. People are super excited to return to Europe, to return to Italy.
So how tough has it been for your business, for businesses in Cortona the last 16 months?
Well, definitely it's been very tough. You know, if you think an average of 75% depending on American tourists. 75%
is American tourists?
Pretty much, yes. And yeah, absolutely. So that you can imagine no American, no business.
So if you're one of the folks asking, what are these COVID-free flights? I took one here. You have to have 72 hours before you get on the plane, a negative PCR test. You'll get another one at the American airport, a third one when you land in Rome or Milan, whatever your destination here in Italy is. But then you can just go and be a tourist. You don't have to quarantine. I know it looks pretty busy behind me. Those are all locals. Virtually no Americans have come here unless they own a home here. That's what they're hoping to see realistically by August and September. But June 1st, a lot of what's been closed, a lot of the restrictions are going to go away. Those places are going to open. And the vice mayor, who works in the city hall there, also told me he's going to have to see a lot more Italians vaccinated. He thinks that that will give Americans a level of comfort to come back to Cortona, to come back under the Tuscan sun. What's at stake? 3.5 million tourist jobs in Italy. A lot of those tourists from America.
A Kansas woman alleging consensual sex turned into a terrifying assault. She's convening a grand jury in the state using a legal loophole from the 1800s. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos has her story.
In February 2018, Madison Smith was a student at Bethany College, a small Christian liberal arts school in Kansas. One night, while doing her laundry, she bumped into a friend. They went back to his dorm room and began engaging in what she calls consensual sex. Shortly thereafter, Madison says she was repeatedly strangled to the point of beginning to lose consciousness.
A lot of people talk about fight or flight, but they don't talk about freeze, and I froze.
Madison and her parents called the police and took her to a hospital for a forensic examination the following day, where nurses took photographs of her injuries. Several weeks later, they went to a meeting with the prosecutor.
I walked in and he was just like, I'm not filing charges. And I was stunned, and to be blunt, I don't remember the rest of that meeting with him until my parents came in because I shut down.
The county attorney refused to file rape or sexual assault charges because Madison did not verbally revoke her consent. He later filed a charge of aggravated battery. Madison's perpetrator pleaded guilty, was convicted, and sentenced to 2 years of probation.
The county attorney thinks that just because I didn't verbally say no, but I gave other signs that I wasn't into what was happening anymore, that it wasn't a rape.
But Madison didn't feel aggravated battery was enough. She felt like it was a case of withdrawn consent, which could be considered rape in Kansas. She and her mom contacted Justin Boardman, a former detective who now consults investigators on handling sexual assault cases. Through a bit of research, Justin found a loophole to get Madison's case in front of a grand jury. An 1887 Kansas law, originally used by prohibitionists looking to have saloons shut down.
There's not a way in most places where a citizen, if they feel like they were wronged by the police department or wronged by the prosecutor, to appeal that to a step higher.
This same law made news in 2008 when anti-abortion activists brought a grand jury against an abortion provider in an attempt to shut down his clinic. They were ultimately unsuccessful. Kansas is one of only 6 states where such a law exists, according to a University of Kansas law journal. What did the law require you to do in order to get a citizens grand jury?
We had to collect signatures from registered voters in our county.
And then when I did the math and figured out that it was really only 326 signatures, I thought, oh my goodness, that doesn't seem impossible.
Madison and her family got to work getting the required signatures, setting up a table with balloons in a hair salon parking lot.
It got people's attention, and we got a lot of people to come sign the petition. I don't think that day we really had anybody who came up or drove through the petition and was like, I don't want to sign.
After a couple of difficulties,
we have the petition filed, and then it gets declined because of a certain signature rule that we may have missed somewhere in the statute. And They had to go back out and redo this. So they did it twice.
Madison's petition has since been approved, and her grand jury is slated to begin on September 29. The grand jury could appoint a special prosecutor to the case. The county attorney, Greg Benefield, declined to comment for this story, citing Kansas rules of professional conduct that he says, quote, do not permit an attorney to comment on the evidence. We also reached out to Jared Stolzenberg, the man Madison Smith is accusing of rape. He provided us a statement that says, in part, quote, I genuinely wish Madison and her family well, and I am extremely and sincerely sorry for all negative and harmful feelings and instances I have caused her and her family. He went on, I am saddened that the case must continue as my life, as I had dreamed, cannot. She has been able to complete her education and move on with her life, all while destroying mine and raking my name over the coals. Not all the information she has shared is true, but instead it has been exaggerated. What she is doing for other women by speaking out is admirable, but it is all at my expense, one that I've already paid dearly for. I have been charged and I am serving my sentence. He says he hopes the grand jury process will bring out both sides of the story, ending by saying, I do not want to minimize the reality of the act of rape. It is ugly, it is disgusting, and it is one of the worst things a person can do. I do not believe I am a person capable of doing that.
There's no right way to deal with rape and sexual assault. Everybody handles it totally differently.
What advice would you give to other states who have no citizen grand jury law?
You have to give your people a chance to fight when a fight is needed.
To see the future of policing, just look to the skies. A California border city, the first in the country to get FAA clearance to surveil an entire city, raising some privacy concerns from residents on the ground. NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce reports from Chula Vista, California.
This is what the future of policing sounds like.
Like a buzzing sound. It's not as loud as a helicopter. I'm trying not to normalize this as I'm trying not to make this as the new normal in our existence here.
Chula Vista is a quiet community on the outskirts of San Diego, but some residents fear a far-reaching police drone program is disturbing the peace.
It's certainly uncomfortable to have basically a cop, looking into your yard.
There was a report of something on fire in the street, and we had multiple 911 calls. But
here's what the cops see.
So we're trying to figure out where it was.
This is the nucleus of the drone operation here at the Chula Vista Police Department, the first in the nation to get FAA clearance to surveil an entire city.
The drone program is made up of really two people. So it's made up of a teleoperator, which is a police officer inside the police department, who's listening to incoming 911 calls. He's listening to the police dispatch. And then you have a pilot in command, which is on the rooftop where the drone is located. Our drone is getting on scene within 3 minutes of the call that is entered, as opposed to over 6 minutes before an officer gets on scene. So they're getting there a lot quicker.
There are 4 drones ready to deploy from strategic locations around the city, all entitled to cruise every inch of airspace within these 52 square miles. Police Captain Don Redmond says the department received the green light to explore the use of drones as first responders during the Trump administration. That was in 2018. Since then, calls for accountability have grown even louder.
We heard the national message that things need to be done differently. So we looked at technology to try and give us an edge to be able to respond and de-escalate situations.
Redmond says this surveillance already leads to fewer interactions between citizens and police. 25% of the time they launch a drone, they don't even send officers on foot. But when they are working together, Redmond says an eye in the sky gives the ones on the ground a preview of what to expect.
There's a couple times we've seen them just kind of for 5 minutes or so.
But what about the civilians who aren't police targets and still feel like they're being recorded?
So I see them almost daily.
The view from 300 to 400 feet above isn't all that clear, but once the drones descend, privacy concerns come into focus for residents like Norel.
I know that it's a cop in the vicinity, and looking over and into my property when I'm not doing anything wrong and there's no warrant.
The department needs a warrant to record anywhere residents have a, quote, reasonable expectation of privacy, like their own yard or inside a building. But if a drone observes a crime in progress, police can legally pursue it.
Wherever we go, when we step out of our homes, right, that we're constantly going to be surveilled, or our camera is going to take a picture of us.
How would you feel if you or your family members were caught in the flight path of one of these drones? Would that make you uncomfortable at all?
It wouldn't, and I only say that because I know helicopters fly over my house all the time.
But new questions emerge after the drones are out of sight.
These drones collect lots of data all the time.
Lily Irani researches this issue as a professor at the University of San Diego.
The police department stores the data. That data can be then shared with other agencies, and that way is absolutely different than helicopters.
The Chula Vista PD says they don't routinely share their drone footage with other agencies, except the local fire department. The public can see flight logs, why the drones were launched, and when, everything except the footage itself.
How transparent is it if you're not willing to readily release the footage to the public?
So the footage is much like a body-worn camera. And at the end of the day, that is downloaded into a secured evidence database, and then it is purged according to our purge guidelines.
3 cities across the country are launching similar drone programs, and they're looking to this sleepy Southern California town for inspiration. Meanwhile, the communities caught in the crosshairs of this technology are watching too, and weighing the cost of this brave new world of policing.
New technology making miracles happen. Indy car driver Sam Schmidt driving, skydiving, and even dancing with his daughter at her wedding after he was paralyzed from the shoulders down more than 20 years ago. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith has Sam's inspirational story.
It's a practice day at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Arrow McLaren team owner Sam Schmidt is standing trackside. We said standing. Sam Schmidt is a quadriplegic.
When you were in that bed 20-some years ago, flat on your back in Florida, did you think this was possible?
Not even close. Yeah, we didn't know if I'd make it the first week, let alone the first month.
Schmidt was then an IndyCar driver. A crash in Orlando left him paralyzed from the shoulders down.
Everybody thought it was insane that why would I go back to a sport that put me in a wheelchair? I've been racing since I was 5 years old. It's all I ever wanted to do is compete at this place. And that to me is what's kept me alive for 21 years.
We first met Sam 5 years ago, and truth be told, we had our doubts. Could a man in his condition actually drive? Yup. 3 years later, he brought his much improved high-tech car to New York. We rode with him through Manhattan traffic from Harlem to Rockefeller Center. He has since raced up Pikes Peak and competed in an amateur race. What if, wondered the people at Arrow Electronics, they could get Sam walking?
When they presented you with the idea of let's try to do this, what did you say?
Where do I sign up? Where do I go? What do you want me to do?
We watched as Sam's team got him set up in an exoskeleton.
This is 1.0, clearly. Their goal with it is that I won't need to be balanced and that I will be able to operate completely myself, which is a mega task.
Imagine walking without assistance. Sam does.
Do you dream about it?
You know, that's the funny thing, Harry. In 21 years, I've never had a dream where I was in a wheelchair.
Wow.
I'm always walking around, with my kids and the race team and everything else.
That morning, Sam's racing team saw something they had never seen before. Their boss, not in a wheelchair.
What is it like for you to be standing up?
I've almost ran out of words to describe the feeling in this entire process. Epic, mega, unbelievable. After 21 years, I didn't remember what the view was like.
The view.
The view. I haven't gotten a full body hug in 21 years. And we got some of those today.
There were tears when Tim Bauman saw Sam that day.
That's pretty wild.
Bauman was part of the crew that pulled Sam from the wreckage 21 years ago.
Seems to me you were having a little trouble holding it together when you saw Sam walk up.
That's not something and I've been a paramedic for 38 years, and we have people with the prognosis. We don't see this. I mean, and to see it, it's inspirational as hell.
Pushing limits seems to be in Sam's DNA. The word can't is not in his vocabulary. Like building the Driven Neuro Recovery Center in Las Vegas and leading the Conquer Paralysis Now Foundation.
Do you feel like maybe there's a part of you that feels like maybe you were chosen? Like you're the guy who can rise above this?
Absolutely. Way, way, way more important than anything I could have done as a professional race car driver.
Standing up, getting out of the wheelchair, it's been a big spring for Sam.
I saw you coming onto this cart, and I kept looking at your empty wheelchair. What's it like for you to leave that behind?
It's amazing, and I think I'm ready to hang a for sale sign on it.
But most important of all was this moment. When he danced with his daughter at her wedding.
I'm surprised I have any tears left. It's been a It's been a wild month.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.